I'm going to cover four topics very briefly today: the media, bad habits, natural disasters, and American jokes. The media, well, when I was young, back in the 1950s, 1960s, even 1970s, we had three news networks: CBS, ABC, and NBC. That was it. And the news was remarkably similar in terms of opinionated bias, shall we say, opinionated prejudice. And a lot of people didn't like that. Okay, they felt that the news had either a right wing or a left wing sentiment, which it may or may not have. I thought they were fairly neutral, in my opinion, but they were also fairly boring. Now, I believe in the late 1970s, Ted Turner came around with a new network called CNN, okay, which was interesting. It seemed to be a bit more liberal than CBS, NBC, ABC, and different and interesting. I didn't care for it that much, frankly. But by the 1990s, with the advent of the internet, we had all sorts of media coming up, which remains with us today. All sorts of channels on the radios, on the televisions, on the internet. So you can hear all kind of things, good and bad, happy and sad. So it is a different world than it used to be. We could say in the old days, the media was oligopolistic, meaning a few big players. Today, it is really a very open field, for better or for worse. Bad habits. We'll talk about bad health habits. Number one, I'm afraid would have to say tobacco. For many years, going back to the 1920s, it was suspected of causing lung cancer, but it was never proven officially until about 1962. The United States Attorney General said that absolutely tobacco causes lung cancer. Since then, we've learned much more. It causes bladder cancer, throat cancer, stomach cancer. I could go on and on. It's got about, I don't know for sure, maybe 20 or 30 cancerous chemicals naturally inherent in the tobacco. They're just there. Okay, so that's a bad habit. Drinking is another bad habit. More so, it affects the mind. You don't want to be drinking alcohol driving a car. It lowers inhibitions. It may make you do things you wouldn't do otherwise. I can't recommend it in any way, shape, or form. Natural disasters, well, depends where you live. If you live in Japan, they have 10,000 earthquakes every year. 10,000. You almost never feel them. But when you do feel them, you're in trouble. I think it was about 1923. Tokyo had an earthquake that almost destroyed the entire city. That could happen again, and you can't predict it. San Francisco in 1906, I believe it was, had an earthquake that almost destroyed the entire city. 1933, Long Beach, California had a disastrous earthquake. We could go on and on here. Okay, and the thing is, you can't predict these things. Hurricanes in Florida. So if you can avoid these places, might be a good idea. You don't want to live there if you don't have to. American jokes. This is something I'm not very familiar with. I don't follow humor, comedians all that much. One interesting American humorist, we call them humorists, was Mr. Lenny Bruce, very popular in the 1950s up to about the middle of 1960s. Some people would say he was vulgar and used bad language and this and that, but he was very funny with or without the bad language. And he's on YouTube. These old films, you can find Lenny Bruce. I would recommend watching him as long as you're not, how can I say, prejudiced against his type of humor. Some other famous American comedians that we don't hear about much these days. Flip Wilson is a black man that was pretty popular in the late 60s, early 70s. Mort Sahl, popular more so in the 50s. Again, I'm not that familiar with American. We don't call them jokers. We call them American humorists. Not that familiar with them. I do feel it is an art. I have a friend who is kind of naturally funny from San Diego, California. And notice I use the word naturally funny. I think it's an art. It's like some people can paint and some people can't. Some people can write interesting things and some people can't. Doesn't mean they're not smart. They may be smart at something else. Some people can make funny jokes and some people can't. So some people can be comedians, humorists, other people can't. Okay, that's all I have to say today. Thank you very much for your time.